At the Caribbean Star Cruises gala dinner, my grandson Oliver leaned over and whispered, "Grandpa, don't drink that." Something in that 11-year-old's eyes sent a chill straight through me. That's when I realized my grandson had just saved me from someone I least expected. And when you find out who wanted to hurt me, you're going to be as shocked as I was. I'm going to tell you everything. But first, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. And tell me where you're listening from. I'd love to know just how far this story is reaching. My name is Emmett Crowell. I'm 68 years old, and I'm a retired U.S. Coast Guard officer. I've lived my whole life in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and after 4 decades at sea, I finally earned a well-deserved retirement. I've always believed that moral justice for an older man means being respected for the values he's built over a lifetime. You know that feeling of having done your duty with honor? That's exactly how I felt every morning when I woke up at 6, even though I didn't have to clock in anymore. Military discipline never really leaves you. It becomes part of who you are. No matter how much the world changes, some principles stay solid as rock. My bond with my grandson Oliver has always been special, the kind that makes life worth living. Weekends were sacred. He'd come over, we'd play chess on the porch, and I'd tell him stories from my days at sea. That boy had a remarkable curiosity. He wanted to know about storms, about navigating by the stars, about courage in the open ocean. It felt like I was passing down everything I'd learned in life, you know. Those moments reminded me why I had worked so hard to leave something good for those who come after us. Oliver had a way of listening that made me feel like my stories truly mattered. The 7-day Caribbean cruise was my retirement gift to the whole family. I thought, after a lifetime of work, I deserved to bring everyone together in a beautiful place, far from everyday worries. Caribbean Star, 7 days sailing through Nassau, Cozumel, and Grand Cayman. It sounded perfect. I wanted to create good memories, the kind that last forever and make people remember you fondly. It was my way of showing gratitude for having a close family. I spent a good chunk of my savings, but it was worth every penny if it brought us closer together. I'd always been proud of my son David, even knowing he was going through financial struggles in the real estate market. Being a commercial real estate broker isn't easy, especially after the crisis. But he never gave up. From time to time, he'd ask for help with a bill, and I'd always help without a second thought. Family is family, right? You don't turn your back on the ones you love just because things get tough. I saw it as my role as a father, to be there when they needed me. Heather, my daughter-in-law, was always polite to me, and I respected her work running her online boutique. We set sail on a sunny Friday in April, with the calmest sea I'd ever seen. I was genuinely happy. Finally, we were going to have real quality time together, free from the pressures of Fort Lauderdale. My suite on Deck 9 had a beautiful view, and David and Heather were in a cabin on Deck 6 with Oliver. I thought, now this is it. We're going to enjoy these days as a real family. Sometimes you have to step away from routine to realize what truly matters in life. The Caribbean Star was breathtaking, a true floating palace with everything a family could wish for. On the very first day of the cruise, David came to have breakfast with me in my suite and dropped one of those lines that just stick in your head. "Dad, maybe it's time to hand over the finances to someone younger, you know? You've already done your part." He said it with a smile like it was a caring piece of advice, but something in his tone bothered me deeply. I told him I still felt perfectly capable of handling what was mine, but he just shrugged. It was as if my opinion about my own life no longer mattered. The family inheritance conspiracy was already starting to take shape, though I didn't realize it at the time. Then, on the second day, Heather started with those seemingly innocent comments about my memory. "Emmett, are you sure you took your blood pressure meds today? Yesterday you asked 3 times what time dinner was." Of course I remembered everything perfectly, but she kept pushing that narrative that I was getting forgetful. And she did it in front of other passengers like she was trying to plant a seed in people's minds. You know when someone tries to make you feel older and less capable than you really are? That's exactly what was happening, and I was starting to see a strange pattern forming. On the third day came the financial pressure disguised as a family opportunity. David suggested it would be nice if I paid for an upgrade to their cabins so they could move to the premium deck so the family could all be on the same floor. That was over $2,000 extra, completely outside the cruise's original budget. When I hesitated, he put on that disappointed look and said, "Come on, Dad. I thought you wanted us to be happy on this vacation." It's amazing how some people can turn your money into a test of love, isn't it? I ended up paying to avoid conflict, but the feeling that I was being manipulated was getting stronger by the day. Then came the inheritance jokes, always in a joking tone, always in front of other people. "Grandpa here doesn't spend a dime while he's alive. He's going to leave a fortune to the grandkids." Or "Emmett even saves on sunscreen. Imagine the nest egg he's got stashed away." They laughed like it was harmless fun, but I could see something calculated behind those smiles. Why on earth were they talking about my money all the time? A man works his whole life, saves his earnings honestly, and suddenly everyone feels entitled to tell him how to spend it. I started to feel like a walking ATM disguised as a grandfather. On the night before the captain's dinner, David insisted I should relax and enjoy with a special drink he would make himself. "Dad, you've worked so hard all your life. You deserve to let loose a little on this cruise." His persistence was strange. He knew I was never much of a drinker and preferred just a glass of wine with dinner. But he wouldn't stop talking about this special drink like it was the highlight of the trip. Something about the way he kept bringing it up made me uneasy, but I still couldn't quite put my finger on what was wrong. Sometimes our gut knows things our mind hasn't fully processed yet. On the afternoon before the captain's dinner, Oliver asked to use the tablet in his parents' cabin to play online. Heather said yes, but when he went to get it, he overheard a conversation that would change everything. David and she were speaking in low voices, thinking no one else was nearby. Oliver froze behind the door, unsure whether to go in or walk away, when he heard words that made his blood run cold. "Did you already put the sedative in the drink?" Heather asked. "Yeah, it'll work perfectly," David replied. The boy stood there, trying to process what he had just heard. The conversation went on, and each word was worse than the last. 15 minutes after he drinks it, he'll start feeling dizzy, David explained with an unsettling calm. "Then we'll suggest taking a walk on the deck to get some fresh air," Heather added, "and when he's staggering near the railing, we'll give him a little push. It'll look like he just lost his balance." Oliver was in shock. These were his own parents, plotting something terrible against his grandfather. How could two people he loved talk about hurting a family member? An attempted murder of an elderly man was being orchestrated right there, in the cabin next door. They even went into the perfect timing they had planned. 9:45 at night is ideal, David said. That's when the security shift change leaves that part of the deck with less surveillance for about 15 minutes. Heather agreed. And with the noise from the party downstairs, no one will hear anything unusual. Oliver tried to make sense of why his parents would want to do something like this to his grandpa. Was it about money? Was it about the inheritance? Nothing made sense to an 11-year-old who had always believed family was supposed to protect, not harm. The boy ran out of the cabin without the tablet, his heart pounding out of control. He had to warn Grandpa, but how do you explain that your own parents are capable of something so awful? Oliver raced through the ship's corridors until he reached my suite on Deck 9 and knocked on the door in a panic. When I opened it, he was breathless with tears in his eyes, and before I could even ask what happened, he pulled me inside. "Grandpa, they want to hurt you," he sobbed. "Dad and Mom put something in your dinner drink." My first reaction was disbelief. How could a son plan something like this against his own father? But the desperation in Oliver's eyes was far too real to be a lie or a child's imagination. I sat him down on the couch and asked him to tell me everything, word for word, exactly as he'd heard it. As he repeated the conversation, my disbelief turned to horror. My own son was planning to drug me and push me off the ship during a moment of low surveillance. It was about inheritance, about money, about getting rid of me to take everything I'd worked for my whole life. I kept my reaction in check so I wouldn't scare Oliver more than he already was. Inside, I felt a mix of betrayal, anger, and fear, but I knew I had to act smart. "Oliver, you were very brave to tell me this," I said, hugging him. "Now I need you to trust me and not tell anyone else that you warned me, okay?" He agreed, still trembling. I knew I had only a few hours to plan my next move and that I couldn't confront David and Heather without solid proof. That was the moment everything changed, from a happy family cruise to a matter of survival. After Oliver left my suite, I stood there for a few minutes trying to process the magnitude of what I just learned. My own son wanted to get rid of me for money. My mind was still struggling to fully accept it, but there was no time for self-pity. I had to act strategically and fast. I picked up the cabin phone and discreetly called the ship's security office, asking to speak to the chief without giving too many details. I simply said I needed to report a delicate situation involving a passenger's safety. The voice on the other end was professional. "Mr. Crowell, can you come down to the office in 10 minutes? In the security office, I explained the situation to the chief officer, a fellow ex-military man named Rodriguez. He listened carefully and agreed we needed solid proof before making any move. "We have a ship's doctor who can run a quick chemical test on any suspicious drink," he said. "But we'll need the drink intact for analysis." We worked out a discreet plan. I would attend dinner as usual, but at the moment of the toast, I'd swap my glass for an identical one filled with ginger ale. The original glass would be immediately sealed and sent to the infirmary lab. Rodriguez assured me complete confidentiality until we knew the facts. I went back to my suite and started preparing other essentials. I tested my phone's audio recording several times. I had to be certain it would work perfectly at the crucial moment. I studied every detail of the captain's lounge, where the cameras were, the best vantage points, and how to position myself to capture any confession. Years at sea had taught me that planning is everything. A miscalculation out there can cost lives. This was no different. I mentally rehearsed every move I'd make during dinner. 2 hours later, Rodriguez came to my cabin with crucial updates. "The head beverage officer is aware of the situation," he said in a low voice. "He knows exactly how to make the switch without raising suspicion." He also showed me a detailed map of the security cameras. 3 different angles would cover the table where we'd be sitting. If anything suspicious happens, it'll all be recorded automatically. It felt strange, planning an operation against my own son. But I knew there was no turning back. At 5 p.m., I went down quietly to the infirmary and spoke with Dr. Mitchell, the ship's doctor. He explained how the test would work. "In 20 minutes, I'll have a preliminary result, and in an hour, the full official report." He showed me the forms he'd use to document everything according to maritime protocols. "Mr. Crowell, any evidence of a crime collected aboard this ship follows strict international procedures," he said seriously. "If there's a controlled substance in that drink, it will be considered attempted poisoning in international waters." I returned to my room and organized a folder with every document I might need: my military ID, financial records, even a recent photo with Oliver. If things spun out of control, I wanted to be ready for any legal outcome. I also wrote a letter to my grandson, telling him he had been brave and did the right thing. I stored everything in the cabin safe but kept copies of the key documents with me. With every passing minute, my determination grew stronger. At 6 o'clock, Rodriguez showed up again with the final plan. "We have 3 security officers positioned as waiters and regular staff in the dining room," he said. "If anything goes wrong, they'll be ready to step in immediately." He handed me a small emergency device. "If you need help, press this button and we'll have personnel there in under a minute." We tested the device twice. We also agreed on discrete signals. If I touched my tie, it meant everything was fine. If I ran my hand through my hair, it meant danger. An hour before dinner, I took a long shower and got dressed carefully. I chose my best tie, the one Oliver always said looked nice on me. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a man about to face the hardest situation of his life. You know that moment when you have to gather every bit of courage you have to do what's right? That's exactly what I felt. I took a few deep breaths, just like I used to before dangerous Coast Guard operations. I was ready for whatever came next. Later, I headed down to the captain's lounge with my phone in my pocket, already recording. David and Heather were waiting for me at the table, smiling like nothing was going on. "Dad, you look sharp tonight," David said, hugging me like he always did. For a few seconds, I almost doubted what Oliver had told me. Could it all have been a misunderstanding? But when Heather said, "Tonight's a special night, you're going to feel really relaxed after dinner," I knew my suspicion was right. Her tone was different, laced with something I couldn't quite define. Dinner went on as usual. We talked about the sightseeing spots we'd visit, about how much Oliver was enjoying the cruise, about future plans. On the outside, we were the perfect family enjoying a vacation together. On the inside, I was mentally documenting every word, Every glance, every strange gesture. David seemed restless, checking his watch constantly. Heather was talking more than usual, almost like she was nervous. When the head steward began serving the special drinks for the captain's toast, my heart started racing. Then David stood up with a glass in his hand and offered it to me with a smile I had never seen before. "Dad, this one's especially for you. A ship-exclusive recipe for our family patriarch." The glass was slightly different from the others, and I noticed Heather watching my every move with unusual intensity. It was now or never. I took a deep breath, smiled back, and accepted the glass as if I was honored by the special attention. But I knew that in the next few minutes, I'd find out if my son was truly capable of trying to kill me for money. While everyone prepared for the captain's official toast, I moved strategically closer to the drink tray. The head steward, just as planned, was ready with the ginger ale glass, identical to mine. Rodriguez was watching discreetly from a nearby table. The cameras were rolling. My phone kept recording audio. Every element of the plan was in place. Now it was just a matter of waiting for the exact moment to make the switch, and seeing if years of military experience would be enough to survive betrayal from my own flesh and blood. The captain stepped onto the small stage at the captain's lounge and called for everyone's attention for the traditional evening toast. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to invite you to a special toast to our esteemed passengers," he announced in his solemn voice. David and Heather exchanged a quick glance and a fake smile, convinced everything was going according to plan. Heather whispered something in David's ear, and I could see just how eager they were. The moment had come. This was when I'd finally learn if my own son truly intended to kill me for an inheritance. Everyone in the lounge raised their glasses, including me, holding my poisoned drink. David stepped closer with a smile I knew I'd never forget. "Dad, here's to the future of our family," he said, resting his hand on my shoulder in a way that once felt affectionate, but now carried something darker. Heather added, "To our dear patriarch, who's always taken such good care of all of us." For a few seconds I stood there pretending to be touched by the tribute. It was surreal, living through this macabre play where my own family was toasting my future death. I lifted my glass toward them, but never brought it to my lips. That's when Dr. Mitchell appeared discreetly at my side, cutting through the festive atmosphere. "Excuse me," he said loud enough for several people to hear. "Mr. Crowell, I must inform you that this drink contains a dangerous amount of a controlled sedative." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. You could hear the waves hitting the ship's hull. David went pale instantly, and Heather let out a small gasp. All the nearby passengers turned toward our table, trying to grasp what was happening. The captain, already aware of the situation thanks to Rodriguez, stepped forward and asked everyone to remain calm. "Dr. Mitchell, can you officially confirm your findings for those present?" he asked. The doctor raised the report in his hand. "Lab analysis confirms the presence of zolpidem in high concentration, enough to cause unconsciousness and severe disorientation in a 70-kilo adult." Each word echoed through the lounge like a sentence being handed down. David tried to interject. "Doctor, there must be some mistake." But his voice was shaky and unconvincing. That's when I pulled out my phone and announced I had something important to share with everyone. "Actually, there's no mistake at all," I said, connecting my device to the lounge's sound system. "You're about to hear exactly how this drink was prepared." I hit play on the recording Oliver had allowed me to make based on what he'd overheard. David's and Heather's voices rang out clearly over the speakers. "Did you already put the sedative in the drink?" "Yeah, it'll work perfectly." The captain's lounge erupted in shock. Passengers covered their mouths. Others stood up from their tables to get a better look. The recording continued with the most chilling details of the plan. 15 minutes after he drinks it, he'll start feeling dizzy, came my son's cold voice. Then we'll suggest taking a walk on the deck to get some fresh air. Then Heather's voice followed. And when he's staggering near the railing, we'll give him a little push. It'll look like he just lost his balance. Several passengers screamed in horror at that moment. A woman at the next table began to cry. David and Heather were frozen, unable to react as their attempted murder of an elderly man was exposed in front of a room full of witnesses. The captain then took full control of the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm while we address this extremely serious matter. Rodriguez and other members of the security team appeared discreetly near our table, ready to act. David and Heather Crowell, you are hereby formally charged with attempted murder and criminal conspiracy in international waters. The captain's words hit the room like a judge's gavel. Heather tried to deny it. That's a lie. Emmett is making this all up. But the desperation in her voice only confirmed her guilt. Security officers moved into strategic positions, sealing the lounge exits to ensure no one left during the procedure. David made one last desperate attempt. "Dad, you can't believe a recording. Anyone can fake that these days." But Dr. Mitchell stepped in, holding the official documents. "The chemical analysis of the drink is irrefutable, Mr. David. This substance was detected using equipment certified by the International Maritime Authority." The net was closing in, and everyone in the lounge could feel the tension growing by the second. That's when I produced the second devastating piece of evidence, a sealed envelope Rodriguez had helped me prepare. "In addition to the recording and the medical report, we also have this," I announced for all to hear. I revealed documents proving David's debts, messages about money on his phone, and even the detailed timeline they had drafted for the accident. Each page I presented was like a rock shattering the glass facade of lies they were trying to uphold. Heather collapsed into a chair, realizing there was no escape from the truth. The atmosphere in the captain's lounge was pure disbelief. No one expected to witness a criminal plot being exposed during a gala dinner. Passengers whispered to each other. Some discreetly took photos, others just stared in shock. David made one last move toward the exit, but security blocked his path instantly. "Sir, you cannot leave this lounge until the proper authorities have been contacted," Rodriguez said with military authority. It was the end of the line for my son and daughter-in-law. The captain then made the official announcement everyone was waiting for. David Crowell and Heather Crowell, for the attempted murder of an elderly passenger and criminal conspiracy. You are formally under arrest and will be handed over to law enforcement at the next port. The security officer stepped forward with handcuffs, and for the first time since all this began, I felt a mix of justice and deep sadness. Seeing my own son cuffed in front of dozens of strangers was both liberating and devastating. But I knew I had done the only right thing: protect my life and the integrity of my true family. As David and Heather were escorted out of the lounge, a few passengers came up to me to offer their support and express their shock at what they had witnessed. "Mr. Crowell, thank goodness you found out in time," said an elderly woman dining near our table. Others shook their heads in disbelief, murmuring about how a family could go this far over money. The captain's lounge slowly returned to normal, but everyone knew they had just witnessed something they would remember for the rest of their lives. I stayed there, seated, still processing the fact that I had survived the most painful betrayal a father can face. As David and Heather were taken to a private room on the ship, Rodriguez informed me that a full search of their cabin would be conducted under maritime security protocols. "Mr. Crowell, we need to check if there's any other evidence that could be related to this crime," he said. Half an hour later, security returned with a box of items that left me even more shocked. Among them was a forged power of attorney with my signature, transferring all my assets to David in case of accident or incapacity. This inheritance conspiracy was even more elaborate than I'd imagined. They hadn't just planned to kill me, they had also set things up so they could legally take everything afterward. Rodriguez also showed me David's phone, where they had found damning messages from the past few months. Conversations with loan sharks demanding nearly $100,000, threats of execution if payment wasn't made within 30 days, and even searches for cruise ship accidents and inheritance in accidental death cases. "Look at this one," Rodriguez said, pointing at the screen. David wrote to Heather, "The old man has to go, it's our only way out." Every new piece of evidence made it clearer that my murder had been in the works for months, not some impulsive decision. The ship's doctor brought me the full official medical report, stamped by the International Maritime Authority. "Mr. Crowell, the amount of zolpidem found in the drink was enough to cause a deep coma in someone your age," he explained gravely. "If you had ingested this substance and been exposed to a hazardous situation, like falling overboard, the chances of survival would have been practically zero." The document was signed, sealed, and logged. irrefutable proof that would hold up in any court in the world. It was scientific confirmation that my son truly intended to kill me. The captain then officially recorded the entire incident in the ship's log, a document with international legal standing. This case will be reported immediately to the authorities in Nassau, our next port of call, he told me. The Bahamian police will board tomorrow morning to carry out the formal arrest and escort of the suspects. Watching my name being written in that log alongside the words attempted murder and family conspiracy was surreal. I had never imagined my peaceful retirement ending with my own son being arrested for trying to kill me. The next morning came the moment that would change everything forever. Nassau's maritime police boarded the Caribbean Star via a fast patrol boat, bringing uniformed officers and equipment to transfer the prisoners. David and Heather were brought out of confinement in handcuffs, escorted by 4 ship security guards. Seeing my son like that, head down, defeated, broke my heart, but I knew justice had to be served. David Crowell and Heather Crowell, the chief officer announced, "You are under arrest for aggravated attempted murder and document forgery." At that moment, I officially submitted my request for emergency custody of Oliver to the authorities. With all the evidence against David and Heather, and considering the danger they posed to the family's safety, the on-duty Bahamian magistrate granted immediate provisional guardianship. Minor Oliver Crowell will remain under the legal custody of his grandfather Emmett Crowell until the family situation is resolved in court, the officer declared. It was a decision that protected my grandson from parents who had become criminals, and ensured he would be with me, where he'd be safe. The most painful moment came when the officers prepared to take David and Heather off the ship. My son looked me in the eye for the last time as a free man and said, "Dad, you don't understand. We needed that money." There was no apology, no remorse, just the selfish justification of someone who thought my death would solve his financial problems. "David," I replied in a steady voice, "I would have helped you if you had just asked me honestly. You didn't need to try to kill me." But he only lowered his head, unable to face the reality of what he had done. Heather tried one last emotional manipulation before being taken away. "Emmett, think about Oliver. He's going to grow up without his parents because of your revenge." But I knew it was nothing more than desperation, a last-ditch attempt to make me feel guilty for the situation they had created themselves. "Oliver will grow up safe and loved," I said firmly. "He'll grow up far from people who are capable of planning a murder for money." The officer then cut her off. "Ma'am, any further communication must go through your attorney." That was the end of any attempt at reconciliation. The handcuffs glinted under the Caribbean sun as David and Heather were escorted to the police launch. Dozens of passengers watched from the ship's rail, some taking pictures, others simply observing in silence as this family tragedy reached its conclusion. The sound of the motor grew louder as the boat pulled away from the Caribbean Star, taking with it 2 people I had once loved as family. Oliver stood beside me, holding my hand, watching his parents being taken to prison. "Grandpa," he whispered, "did they really want to hurt you?" "Yes, champ," I answered, "but you saved me." The crowd on deck began to disperse as the launch disappeared into the horizon, but a few passengers came over to commend me for having the courage to face the situation. "Mr. Crowell," said a man in his 50s, "you did the right thing. Family doesn't mean accepting everything." An elderly woman added, "You're lucky to have such a brave grandson to protect you." I simply smiled and thanked them. Kind words from strangers who understood that sometimes justice and family don't go hand in hand. What mattered was that Oliver and I were safe, and the truth had prevailed. By late afternoon, the Caribbean Star had resumed its normal course through the Caribbean after the stop in Nassau. Rodriguez came to see me with an update that all legal procedures had been completed. "Mr. Crowell, the case has been officially transferred to the Bahamian justice system. David and Heather will await trial in Nassau's prison." He handed me a folder with copies of all the documents and evidence. "You may need these papers when you return to the United States." It was surreal to hold a folder containing proof of the crime my own son had tried to commit against me. Oliver and I sat in silence for a while, watching the blue Caribbean waters from the suite's window. He had lost his parents, I had lost a son. But we had both gained something precious, the certainty that we could always count on each other. "Grandpa," He finally said, "Did I do the right thing telling you about their conversation?" "You saved my life, Oliver," I replied, hugging him tightly. "And now we'll keep moving forward together, taking care of each other." The tragedy was over, justice had been served, and a new chapter of our lives was beginning. Just the two of us, but closer than ever. The first days back in Fort Lauderdale were a mix of practical and emotional adjustments. Oliver slept in my guest room, which we quickly turned into his own personal space. He was surprisingly resilient, organizing his belongings, helping with household chores, and rarely mentioning his parents unless it was necessary. One morning he said, "Grandpa, I need to get some clothes from the old house." I went with him, and it was strange stepping into a place I once considered familiar but now felt like the scene of a crime. Oliver was matter of fact. He took what he needed, left a note for the neighbors explaining the move, and we left. In the car, he said, "It's weird, but I don't miss that place." The call we had been waiting for finally came. The trial was over. David was sentenced to 18 years in prison for aggravated attempted murder and document forgery. Heather got 16 years for the same crimes. "How do you feel hearing that?" I asked Oliver after hanging up. He thought for a moment. "Relieved, actually. Now I know they can't try anything like that when they get out. I'll already be an adult." It was a mature observation that impressed me. The moral justice I had sought for our situation as seniors had been carried out through the legal system, and we both felt like we could finally move forward without looking back. Our routine settled in naturally. Oliver enrolled in the local school, where we discreetly explained the situation to the counselors. We began family therapy, not for some dramatic trauma, but as a practical way to navigate such a major family change. I learned about the legal responsibilities of being a guardian. He learned about limits and expectations in a different home. There were no major conflicts, just two smart people working through everyday matters. When I asked if therapy was helping, he said, "Yeah, mostly to understand that it's not my fault they did what they did." It was exactly what I needed to hear. The prison letters began arriving. First from David, then from Heather, both trying to reconnect emotionally and asking for forgiveness. Oliver would read them silently and hand them to me. "Do you want to reply?" I asked after the first one. "Not now," he said. "Maybe never. He says he loves me, but people who love you don't try to kill your grandpa for money." We kept the letters in a folder with the other legal documents, not out of sentiment but for organization. Oliver's stance was clear. He acknowledged they were his parents biologically, but felt no emotional obligation to keep in touch. It was a mature decision I fully respected. One quiet Sunday afternoon, Oliver was doing homework at the kitchen table when he said, without looking up from his book, "Grandpa, I think we came out okay in all of this." I asked what he meant. "Well, you're alive, I have a safe place to live, they're in prison where they can't hurt anyone, and we found out we can count on each other." He went on writing like it was just a casual observation. I smiled and went back to my reading. We hadn't built some perfect movie family life, but we had something functional, honest, and based on mutual respect. Oliver had saved me on that cruise, and now we were saving each other every day in small, practical ways. That was enough. And now to you who have followed my journey, have you ever been in a situation where family tried to manipulate you for money or inheritance? Share in the comments if you've faced financial abuse from relatives and how you protected yourself. Remember, true family protects, it doesn't harm for personal gain. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and keep the notification bell on. I share daily stories of people who have faced family betrayal and rebuilt their lives with dignity. You never lose the right to protect yourself and seek justice, no matter who the abuser is. To listen to the next story, click the box on the right. Thank you for watching.